Hello, everyone. So I recently discussed all of the seasons of the first era of Big Brother, including the gameplay rankings, and now I'm going to rank everyone from the first 6 seasons, not including Big Brother 1, outside of Chicken George, and ranking all of them based on how I feel about them as a player at this point of time in Big Brother's history. I'm probably going to record this over several days since this list has a lot of people and I have to kind of generalize it a bit since I'm ranking 66 people and I delved into them more on their season gameplay tier rankings. So I'm going to record it bit by bit and hopefully I'll get all of it recorded and processed within a few days. So as we all know, I have 7 tiers that I use for these rankings. So Abysmal, bad, potential or inconsistent, mediocre, solid, good, or great, and all of them have already been placed in rankings, but what's interesting is that the ones that were in All-Stars, I have to accommodate both of their performances, so some of them will shift based on how their second season affected their first run, and yeah. So, dead last at 66 is Scott from Big Brother 4. He was able to get into a majority alliance, but it was mainly due to the Exes twist, and nothing he actually did. Despite that, he turned off the entire house with his instability, and his alliance wanted to send him home the first week, but Nathan didn't want to bite the bullet. He was becoming a huge target for the next week, and in addition to that, he was pulled from the show due to throwing stuff around the house and his instability. At 65th is Justin from Big Brother 2. Of course, he is here for similar reasons that Scott is here, as he was pulled from the game before the first week even ended. He was warned several times to stop threatening people and making the house unsafe, but was pulled for pulling a knife on Krista's neck. I put him a bit higher because he was in a better position than Scott was, despite him being associated with Chilltown, and his number might have caused Nicole to go home that week, and Chilltown is in a better position if that happens. At 64th is Holly from Big Brother 5. Outside of the people who were polled, Holly is easily the worst player of the era, and I wouldn't be shocked when I eventually rank everyone in Big Brother US history that she's still the worst. She generally wanted to work with the woman and to make friends with everyone, but the woman completely shut her out and the men weren't interested in working with her. She could have been a number for the Four Horsemen, but Drew wanted her gone and Scott pushed for her to go because he was jealous of her relationship with Jace. There's a clear hole in her perception when they thought she was more cunning and smart than she was, but she was well-meaning and well-intended. At 63rd is Amy, from Big Brother 3. One of the main reasons why Amy is down this low on the list is that she was evicted early and was able to come back, so she got a chance that most house guests didn't get. Her first eviction was because she was doing very poorly socially, had no strategy whatsoever, and was very emotionally driven. And she was 1 vote away from being the first boot as well. When she came back, she used her HOH for personal revenge reasons and became a perma-pawn for the rest of the season. She had no chance to win a jury vote, and she was still booted by Jason and Danielle, primarily because they simply liked Lisa more. Great character, but has no good trait for BB as a player. At 62nd is Ashleigh from Big Brother 6. She's primarily someone who has absolutely no drive whatsoever, as she apparently barely campaigned when she was on the block, didn't take the initiative to speak to the HOH, and she had the chance to return to the game, but quit before she was sequestered for a week, since she mentioned that her first episode seeing was the Michael eviction episode. While we never actually saw it, the house mentioned several times that she was annoying, snobbish, and they got rid of her despite not being a threat, because they just could not stand her, so she wasn't meshing well with the house guests. At 61st is Amanda from Big Brother 4, another person who just had no drive. I don't get why some people called her a rat, and no one in the house trusted her, but she wasn't involved in any sort of alliances, and it didn't help that her ex was who her ex was, and it caused a lot of drama on the first day, where they needed an easy scapegoat. She was nominated, knew she was going to be nominated, so at least she had some good instinct there, but did absolutely no campaigning to stay in the house, and no one really cared. Maybe she would have been more comfortable if she was there on her own, but she would probably be a fish out of water in most seasons. At 60th is Lori from Big Brother 3. I feel like she would start a sub-tier of Abysmal players who had somewhat of a chance to stay, either due to being in a majority alliance at some point, or went home in a very close vote. Lori fits the latter, and it was because she was able to make some relationships with people, and they also promised to vote to keep her. The tides did start to turn against her, since the house saw her as unpredictable and kind of irrational, and she thought the idea of strategy was disgusting. She thought that the idea of strategy was just awful, and she didn't want to take part in it. She most likely does poorly on most seasons, so she is here in addition to the other reasons listed. At 59th is Autumn from Big Brother 2. One benefit for her pertaining to this list is that she was a part of the Majority Alliance, where people below her can't even say that. I don't think a whole lot of people were actively targeting her entering the second HOH, but it was clear that she was at the bottom of her alliance, and some people actively were targeting her. She was not a strategist whatsoever, and was seen as a weak liability to her allies and an annoyance to her non-allies, so they were all more than fine with her going when she was nominated. She also threatened to leave and quit several times apparently, which is why she was partially nominated and why she was voted out. It was clear that she wasn't right for Big Brother at all. At 58th is Michael from Big Brother 6. Like Autumn, he is in this position above the others mainly because he was able to get in an alliance at the very minimum. In general, he didn't get to know many of the other house guests, isolated himself from the others, and the only way he could bond with some of the women was if he was flirting with them, which rubbed them the wrong way. There was no indication that he was very strategic at all, and reacted horribly when he was up, and when he was told about making the woman feel uncomfortable. He was sent home because the house claimed they needed sanity when they all acknowledged that he was not a threat. And the final person in this tier at 57th is Mike from Big Brother 5. I will say that out of everyone on this list, he was probably the best strategically, which doesn't say much, but it's something. He was way too hyper-focused on Scott and Jace, and offered nothing new when the entire house was already planning on targeting them. He was also starting to figure out what would become the eventual backdoor as well, so I think he could have worked some more strategies or come up with more strategies had he stayed longer. In general, he was a fish out of water on his season, making it hard to socialize with and bond with his cast, and I think that would be the case if he was on most casts. So the first person in this tier at 56th is Tanya from Big Brother 3. I do think she has some social skills where she's able to get along with the girls and was able to get into the Majority Alliance. I don't recall many people actively talking about targeting her, and she was supposed to be the pawn when Marcellus nominated her. Ultimately, Roddy campaigned to keep Josh safe, and she actively did work that caused more people to vote her out, due to her starting drama with Amy and Marcellus, and all of the house guests just not respecting her in general. In addition to all of that, she didn't campaign whatsoever and had no coherent strategy and was booted in a close vote. At 55th is Michelle from Big Brother 4. In some ways, I do think she was screwed by the exes twist, where I could see her easily fitting in with the Majority Alliance, since she had some ties with the girls and Nathan. At the same time, she wasn't a strategist whatsoever, and was seen as extremely expendable to everyone else in the house. She was nominated as a pawn, and she just whined about it, and didn't campaign whatsoever to stay in the house, only to be blindsided out of the house, kind of like Tanya. The awareness and ability just was not there for her, and I don't think the house guests respected her as a player at all. At 54th is Shannon from Big Brother 2. She is such a weird one, since while she mainly alienated and provoked a lot of the house guests, only focusing on a select few people in the house and being on the outs due to her behavior, she was not the initial target when she went up against Will, and she was only voted out because she told most of the other house guests to vote her out. Maybe Shannon would have calmed down if she was without Will, and she was second in a HOH that sent her out, so I could see her being good in competitions. At the same time, she victimized herself a lot with her actions and didn't have the fortitude to want to continue playing the game, and she put herself in the position where she was on the outs. At 53rd is Scott from Big Brother 5. He was able to get into an alliance that had some power early on in the season, and they were very loyal to him, so that's more than most of the early boots, or what most of the early boots can say for themselves. In addition to that, he was the pawn on this final week, but became the target when Jace, who was the target, that won the veto that week. So he was sent home there. At the same time, he actively made his alliance weaker as he alienated and targeted Marvin, who was someone who wanted to work with them, and sent home Holly, who was someone who would have voted with them. In addition to that, he pissed off several people in the house with his actions and attitude, so he drew unnecessary attention on himself, in addition to being a compulsive liar. At 52nd is Josh from Big Brother 3. He was able to get a group of people to get into a solid alliance of 6 on the first night, and replacing people, Amy for Roddy and Jerry for Tanya, so props to him for that. At the same time, it became clear very quickly that his alliance didn't trust him very much. He didn't have much power, and the entire house saw through what he was trying to do. Luckily for him, he built some relationships where he was able to stay against Tanya, but he was kind of at other people's mercy the rest of the season, where people had varying opinions on him, and he was used as a number to split up the couples. He was sent home because someone who was his ally was trying to do damage control in a position where he shouldn't have went home, and actively ruined his chances of staying, where he had the vote at one point to stay. At 51st is Howie from Big Brother 6 and Big Brother 7. It's crazy that I have the first returnee ranked this low, especially over 2 returnees that are 2-time pre-jurors at this point, which he has never been a pre-juror in either of his seasons. Anyways, Howie has moments in his 2 seasons where everyone liked and enjoyed his company, but this was mainly during the first half of Big Brother 6, and then people quickly got over his shtick. Fortunately for him, he was never seen as a threat and wasn't completely awful socially, so he was not in danger of being an early boot. But he was never a threat to win, and I don't see him winning any jury vote. And despite all of that, he made a lot of poor strategic moves. Of course, there was his awful HOH, but he was very impulsive with his moves. His reads got worse as the seasons went on, got very overcompetent, was blabby with information, and alienated the people that were not in his alliance. So I don't have faith in him as a player at all, really. At 50th is Dana from Big Brother 4. Honestly, I don't think her big fault in the game was her strategic thinking, as she was the first one who planned on floating between the two sides, but as things went on, she mainly flipped to the Stooges. The issue is, her social game was not good enough for her to float, and everyone saw through what she was doing strategically from the first week. Her alliance pushed for her to go home on G's HOH, and she was lucky it didn't happen. She wins HOH, and her mistake was not nominating Nathan next to Allison, and also getting involved in the romance drama with Allison and Justin. June warned her that the Stooges were not loyal, and we saw that when they tossed her to the Wolves immediately the next week. And the house mentioned that she made the game personal, and they just found her very annoying, so they didn't respect her. At 49th is Eric from Big Brother 6. He is someone who has some of the traits to do well in Big Brother, the ability to win competitions, and the ability to make bonds with a decent amount of people. This would have caused him to be put higher, but the issue is that this only works on about half of the house. He made it clear when he saw others as not worthy or he saw them as expendable, and didn't bother with some other people, which caused a huge divide in the house. He wanted to micromanage and control everything, and people who are not about that will handle it and obviously are going to retaliate against it, which is exactly what happened when Kesar won HOH. In addition to that, he blew up his guys' alliance for little reason and created a cult alliance, and then wanted to preach honesty to people. If he was able to take accountability for some of his misfallings and have the ability to learn from it, I would put him higher, but he would do the same thing over and over again. At 48th is Jerry from Big Brother 3. He was able to get into a solid alliance, but people started feeling weirded out by him, and that only exasperated once he not only used the veto, which was a huge no-no back then, but used race and sexuality as a rationale, which rubbed everyone the wrong way. Of course, most of the house mentioned that his time was limited after this, but he does end up staying a while. But I think that was mainly because the HOH rounds benefited him, and the only person who could have targeted him in Roddy made a deal with him. And he became a huge non-threat in the house. It was hard for Jerry to bond with people in the house due to their huge age and generation gap. In the round where he eventually goes, it was because Jason wanted to make a very easy move, and he kind of gave up once he was on the block. I think he would be an earlier boot on most seasons, and his strategic and social flaws are large ones. At 47th is George from Big Brother 7. He is the only person on this list who played a completely different game, where he was used to having to kiss up to America, and they were not allowed to strategize or anything in BB1. So when he came in All Stars, he had to learn the game from scratch, and it did kind of put him as a target in the early weeks, since it would be an easy boot. After making it through that, he was not able to find people who wanted to work with him, and when he did get power on his HOH, he was all over the place with his moves. He really didn't know much about what was going on and was on his own island, where I do see him either being an earlier boot or someone who was dragged along, somewhat like how he was in this season. At 46th is Michael Cowboy from Big Brother 5. It's so crazy that I have a runner-up who lost the season by 1 vote, lower than 2 pre-jurors, but the base of Cowboy's game and his skill set overall is just utterly hollow at best and awful to nothing at worst. He got in an alliance, which is a good thing, but he had absolutely no agency, power, or influence in that alliance whatsoever, while all the others kind of just ran the alliance. In addition to that, Cowboy had a poor social game with everyone else in the house, and no one respected him whatsoever, while he was also encouraging the horsemen to make dumb moves, like targeting Marvin and booting Holly. After Scott and Jace were booted, Cowboy essentially did nothing and was carried to the end of the game, and was pawned a few times because he was an unthreat. But I guess him being beside Adria and Natalie caused them to warm up to him, so he did get their votes to do that, but it wasn't due to anything he was actively trying to do. And the one chance he had to have any sort of agency in the game, he decided to boot Nokomis over Diane, who wasn't taking him to the final 2, and it's clear that he just made Drew's move for him. This was clearly his highest ceiling, and it wasn't a high one, despite his placement. At 45th is Jace from Big Brother 5 and Big Brother 7. He is someone who generally has a lot of good ideas, or a lot of the right ideas, especially pertaining to strategy, and what he should do to end up doing well, but he is never able to pull it off. In Season 5, he attempted on having many relationships with people, but pissed too many people off with his antics, where he was only reliant on the 4 horsemen and Holly, where even that caused a lot of distrust within that group and him. His alliance voted out Holly because they thought she was manipulating him, and he was seen as a huge bully amongst everyone, where the 6-finger plan formed to get him out of the house, and he was sold out by his own ally, Drew. And while he got better socially and strategically in All-Stars, he was not a good enough game to play the floater game, which he was trying to do, and he let his explosive personality ruin whatever momentum he was gaining. He is good at competitions, but the other stuff is why he will most likely always struggle to last long in Big Brother. And the final person in this tier at 44th is Kaysar. What is interesting about Kaysar is that a lot of people mention that he is a poor player due to his strategy, and I only somewhat agree with that. It is clear that he does not know when to tone it down and when to make a big move, and we saw that on his 2 seasons. But I mainly think his largest flaw in the game comes from his social games, where he is never able to bond with a significant amount of people, and being on the surface nice isn't enough to have a good social game. Him not speaking much caused him to be nominated the first week, and he was never able to form the necessary bonds with the majority of the house. And in All-Stars, we saw that even more, as he was more preoccupied with the quote-unquote sides dynamic that he and his allies were trying to recreate. In addition to that, a lot of the house guests saw him as arrogant, so that kind of tanked his social game even more. He was able to pull off the good move with his Season 6 HOH, but I think it was mainly due to the twist of the duos that caused that to happen. So the first person in this tier at 43rd is Cheryl from Big Brother 2. I really don't have much to say about her whatsoever. She was the first person ever evicted in this version of Big Brother as we know it, and she is only on here because she did nothing to cause her boot, which even the house guests were aware of. At the same time, I don't know how she would do on other seasons, and as the game of Big Brother really got competitive and cutthroat, even as the season went on. I don't have enough to put her in the bad tier, but I can't put her anywhere else but in the lowest in this tier. At 42nd is Lori from Big Brother 5. She is another one who I feel like will be on the lower end of this tier when it's all said and done. Lori made some mistakes, with taking the $10,000, making her an easy excuse of a target, and while she was on the block, she was very indecisive about whether she wanted to go home or not, where it got back to people that weren't her allies. At the same time, she was able to align with a decent amount of people, had a solid enough understanding of strategy, was pretty good socially from the few weeks she was there, and was good in the few competitions she competed in. Everyone saw that though, and she couldn't escape it once Karen was nominated beside her, but I could easily see her doing well in other seasons. At 41st is Natalie from Big Brother 5. The thing with sibling or twin twist is that it severely handicaps how one person, the one who's usually not the main person the house is introduced to at the beginning, plays in the beginning, and it's even worse when you can only spend half of your time in the house, pretending to be someone else as well, and the other half of those first few weeks are sequestered in a hotel. When she ended up entering the game, the house guests had a hard time deciphering between herself and her sister, especially with who did what when they were playing as one. She ended up being known as the more fiery one, despite not winning the HOH and being worse in competitions. At 40th is Sarah from Big Brother 6. In many ways, Sarah is borderline average, but she didn't last long enough for me to put her in the mediocre tier. She is a solid enough or a mediocre social game, never teetering in one direction or the other, wasn't bad strategically, but also was not notable in that category, and was outright poor in competitions. At the same time, I think she would have done well if James was not being so sloppy, since that was why she was targeted and went home, but she also doesn't have many highs as a player overall. Apparently she did get emotional and was very insecure from what was reported on the feed, and that partially played out as to why her run took place in the way that it did. The final person in this tier is David from Big Brother 4. Out of all the pre-jurors, I feel like he was the one who had a lot of untapped potential and was cut too soon, with little to no fault of his own. I think he's the highest ranked pre-juror from this era, and it says a lot, especially since there are 2 returning pre-jurors on this list and era as well. Of course, due to the twist, he was put in an alliance of 8, though I think he would have been in that majority alliance anyways. He had a tight trio with Erica and Jack, which made him more threatening compared to the other 2, and had solid relationships with the Stooges enough, where they believed him, Jack, and Nathan, who he also had close relations to. Unfortunately for him, people saw through his erraticism and realized that he isn't as dumb as he wanted to portray, causing him to catch the stray from Nathan, Dana, Allison, and Justin's drama. Good in comps, strategically capable, and socially strong as well. So the first person in the mediocre tier at 38th is Jack. I think Jack did pretty well in fitting in with the Big Brother forecast, despite him being decades older than all of the others, which is something that many older Big Brother house guests cannot accomplish. He was able to find himself in the Alliance of 8 and was particularly close with Erica and David, but they did have less influence than the other side. At the same time, he did have a good social game, where he could have easily won had he made it to the end. I put him here because he was very close to going home both times he was on the block and ended up staying, and it was outside factors that saved him. He was too laser focused on Justin and the Stooges overall, and I think whenever he did get strategically active, he made things a lot worse for himself and Erica, and a lot of it wasn't shown on the episodes. I also could see some scenarios where he is an early boot in other seasons due to the aforementioned. At 37th is Kent from Big Brother 2. I'm actually shocked that Kent ended up being higher than Jack on this list, especially since Kent does have a worse social game. What's weird about him is that there are moments or some weeks where he does have a good social game, and a lot of the other house guests like him, and then there are other weeks where the house cannot stand him, and his social weaknesses eventually cause his position to get worse on his HOH and his subsequent boot the next week. I do think he had relatively good reads on the house guests on a game level, and did try to make many alliances, but all that ended up backfiring. At the same time, I don't see him doing any better if he was on any of the latter seasons. Rest in peace to him. At 36th is Kiara from Big Brother 3. Her journey was all over the place, and she is probably one of the biggest examples of being a mediocre player. She does have a social game where she's able to bond with many people, and will more often than not always get herself into the majority alliance on any given season. She was definitely playing the game and being strategic with her choices, but she's also the type that lets personal things get in the way of both her social and strategic game, where everyone realized how two-faced she became. After trying to boot Lisa and turned off most of the house, and in a way to save face, she threw another ally, Josh, under the bus, which it wasn't a good move on her part, and nominated her showmate, who almost went home. She did almost stay in her final week due to the bond she had, but she did little campaigning and just ranted about how rigged things got, good in competitions, competent enough strategically and socially, but gets in her own way. At 35th is Jennifer from Big Brother 6. I think people forgot how rough her start was, where a bunch of people threw her under the bus and there was talk of backdooring her, especially with her trying to flirt with the guys and using Rachel's washroom without permission. Luckily, she made it through that and ended up distancing herself from Michael to go with what would become the friendship. No one saw her as a threat, and she was one of the people in the alliance that had the smallest target on their backs, since she at least somewhat spoke to the Softs. We did see her and April somewhat plot themselves here and there, but any self-interest went out the window when she won HOH, and ended up doing her allies' dirty work, when she should have backdoored James, where she would have been good with the entire house. She willingly sacrificed herself for her group and went home for it. I can't say she's a bad player, as she's willing to make moves and can blend in, but nothing here really indicates that she's higher than mediocre. At 34th is Adria from Big Brother 5. She has the benefit over her sister Natalie for a few reasons. One of them is that the house was introduced to her first, so everything was associated with her. In addition to that, she was the one who ended up winning the HOH that ruined their games. Didn't tell the Alliance about the nominations ahead of time, brought some uncomfortable elements into the game, and then was whiny about the retaliation against it. I appreciate how hard she played. She was good in competitions, and we still don't know how she would have done if she played on her own from the beginning. Overall, she has some of the traits to do well, and isn't bad enough for me to rank her lower or in a lower tier. At 33rd is Bunky from Big Brother 2. He is someone who I still kind of don't know how I feel about as a player. He knew when to kiss butt, though he hated doing it, but I don't think that he was trying to float. Bunky was a part of the top alliance, but he never had any actual influence in what was going on, which he and Kent eventually realized, but were stuck when Nicole and Hardy flipped on them. He was close in some of his final competitions, and did have a decent read here and there, but I don't think a lot of the cast respected how little backbone he had and how much of a kiss-ass he was, but he did start to grow a backbone in the season, just a bit too late. I don't know how he would have done on a later season, where it is more competitive, faster paced, and you have to be a lot more adaptable, which aren't his strong suits, but he has enough traits to always do decently in a season. At 32nd is Eric from Big Brother 3. For someone who was a fourth boot, though there was no pre-jury at this point, I think he played one of the better games. He was a part of the majority alliance that formed and was a respected person in that alliance, where he did his best to keep everyone together and just supported Roddy mainly. He was pretty solid in competitions from what I remembered, and is a relatively standard player, where you form an alliance, ride with it, and be in a position of power. He lost the HOH competition to Jerry, where it was the only way he was in danger that week, and was supposed to stay, but Danielle, Jason, and Marcellus flipped the house where he ended up going over Lisa. While he's not really impressive strategically, he isn't unimpressive, and is just a very on-the-level player who would probably do better on other seasons. At 31st is Robert from Big Brother 4. He isn't actually bad or anything, but I don't think Robert is really good or solid in much of anything. He came into the house at a disadvantage due to being an ex, but quickly bonded with Justin and G, which is good. He did not utilize Erica whatsoever in the house until he had absolutely no one else during his last 2 weeks or so in the house, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way with his sexist comments, fidgety personality, and other tics. Robert was a complete non-threat in the eyes of everyone else, which helped him last the longest, but even despite that, they wanted to boot him before G just due to his social flaws. He is solid enough in competitions, but was really poor strategically from what I can remember, and wasn't strong socially. Didn't do much to be an early target, but only became a threat at the very last quarter, and relied on the strengths of his allies instead of being a strong player on his own, or having a high ceiling as a player. At 30th is Marcellus from Big Brother 3 and Big Brother 7. There's definitely a lot of solid traits to Marcellus as a player, but there are elements that severely hold him back as a player for me. I do think, for the most part, he has some good instincts, especially pertaining other people, where he can tell their agendas pretty quickly, no matter what they're trying to pull, which we see on both seasons pertaining Danielle, Roddy, Kiara, Chilltown, Janelle, so on and so forth. Socially, he is all over the place, as he can make several bonds with people, and strong bonds as well, but he tends to play martyr, and once people don't see things in the way he sees them, he turns on them and gets very sanctimonious. This causes for him to get very emotional, which always ends up fogging his gameplay, and I think this was one of the reasons why he made the move he made that sent him home on Big Brother 3. On his first season, the format supported this type of gameplay, but he couldn't keep up with the changing format, and how people saw the game differently from him, which was apparent on Big Brother 7, and everyone saw him as incredibly bitter and wanted very little to do with him. He is pretty good at competitions, which is a plus, but Marcellus is too emotional and snobbish at times to really thrive as a player. At 29th is Yvette from Big Brother 6. Yvette was definitely playing the game from the beginning, as she was often strategizing with Eric, though she mentioned wanting to boot the women and working with the guys. When she was brought into the friendship, her game became all about them, where she volunteered to be on the block several times, made moves that would benefit the team, and give up any sort of self-interest she should have throughout the season, that she should have had. I do think her instincts were pretty strong at times, where she knew April and Jennifer weren't trustworthy, was right about Kaiser and Janelle as players, and knew who she could beat, as well as who she couldn't beat. Whatever potential she had as a player went out the window because of her emotions and letting it lead most of her decisions throughout the season, where caused people outside of and inside of her alliance to get annoyed with her, despite being able to make some bonds with people. In general, it was her lack of emotional intelligence that did her in at the end, which is why she is in this tier. At 28th is Monica from Big Brother 2. There are points where we saw Monica start to pick up the game as she was a part of the top alliance, and she had the untouchables with Hardy and Krista, but that ended up fizzling, and she didn't seize the opportunity to take control of the game. Monica was able to have some good reads on the house guests and their motivations pretty well, but nothing was really done with this information for most of the season. She was able to get along with most of the other house guests and knew that she had to be under the radar since she would be a target quickly if she was not quieter. Monica was able to win the Final Four HOH and made the power move, though it was the only obvious move at that point in time. I don't know how well Monica would do if she was on a faster, more strategic season, since she had a hard time implementing strategies and she wasn't good in emotions, and I do think she was very laser-focused on Nicole, where it blinded her gameplay at times. At 27th is Bo from Big Brother 6. I remember having very little to say about Bo as a game player, since he got such a poor edit on the show. I think he was one of the better social players in the season, since he was one of the few from the friendship who was able to have decent enough relationships with the house and knew how to lay under the radar for most of the season. He really didn't make much mistakes at all throughout the season, but he never showed any solid gameplay or any high potential that would put him higher than mediocre. Out of everyone in this era, he is probably the most baseline player in the era. At 26th is Janelle from Big Brother 6 and Big Brother 7. For someone who made it to third place twice, Janelle should be a lot higher and should be in a completely different tier altogether, but when you look at her 2 games, it is middling at best. Janelle's issues came from not having a good social game in both seasons, as the other house guests saw her as extremely snobbish and uptight, where it alienated her from a lot of the house guests, and the same thing happened in Big Brother 7 as well, though there are pre-game alliances and elements that came into place. She was able to eventually find an alliance, but it caused her to only want to work in the sides dynamic, which shows that she's very unadaptable, but she was able to do well in that dynamic. The difference in Big Brother 6 is that she didn't rely on competitions to make it that far, or to make it far, where she absolutely needed to win competitions for sure in order to make it far in Big Brother 7, or else she would have been an early boot. Janelle also played emotionally throughout the 2 seasons, and whatever strategic potential she had was thwarted due to it, where it was just due to personal revenge in Big Brother 6, and she was being manipulated by, well, in Big Brother 7. Despite that, she did perform well on 2 seasons, and very well could have won one of them, but the skill set is lacking, despite her placement on those seasons. At 25th place, and the first person in this tier, is Nokomis from Big Brother 5 and Big Brother 7. Her game and journey was somewhat hard to conceptualize overall, since she has one good game and one poor game, which is a theme for a lot of the returnees from this era. In BB5, she did have trouble fitting in at first, but was eventually able to blend herself in and was able to position herself where the other side wanted to use her for a vote, while she got herself in an alliance with the other side as well. Once she gained momentum, she was able to win 3 HOHs and helped direct the season in her direction and benefit, to the point where she became one of the biggest threats left to win. In Big Brother 7, she had some of the same issues with not fitting in, but she was snipped extremely early. While she found her people on her first season, there were still social holes there since she didn't speak to the other side much at all throughout the season after the first 2 or so weeks, and she didn't manage the jury well, and her social issues became a huge problem in her second season. She was still second in her final HOH comp in BB7, so I think she could have won some comps had she lasted longer. In general, Nokomis is the type of player where they can only do well in a certain season or a certain vibe of a season that has similar vibe to the one that was in Big Brother 5. At 24th is Alison from Big Brother 4 and Big Brother 7. I had a feeling she was going to drop once I finished watching her journey on Big Brother, but I didn't expect her to drop this much, where she's lower than a decent amount for Big Brother 4 house guests. When you really look into it, Alison does have issues socially, where she comes off extremely fake and bitchy, which turns people off. They mentioned that she was extremely emotional as well, which played a part in her strategic game. She was going to be a pre-juror if Nathan didn't use the veto on her, and she's her first boot on her second season, so the chances of her being a pre-juror more often than not, from the sample that we have been given, is larger than I would like to admit. At the same time, she is one of the most self-interested players in Big Brother history, which is a really good trait. She's always thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead, has no problem working with people she doesn't like, and is good at competitions, which all benefited her a lot. I think she had a lot of good reads during her seasons and utilized her potential well. The issue is that she cannot adapt her gameplay from Big Brother 4 to All Stars, and it kind of makes her flaws more imminent, since her eviction was more self-inflicted compared to the other pre-jurors. At 23rd is Justin from Big Brother 4. I never would have thought that he would end up placing higher than Alison, but in general, I do think he has the skills to be a competent Big Brother player overall. He is one of the most consistent competitors pertaining to competitions ever, as he was in the top 2 or 3 in every competition he competed in during the season, is able to have a solid enough social game where everyone likes and respects him, and he was competent strategically. He was disadvantaged due to being an ex, and he was the main target for the other side, but was able to make it decently far due to his side winning HOHs and making some solid relationships with people. I think his big issue is that he has no self-interest whatsoever, or he had no self-interest whatsoever, as he gave up the moment he was in danger, while he also let Dana go way too easily, where it benefited him to keep Dana over June, but he thought about his allies instead, and he didn't push harder for Nathan to stay when it benefited him exponentially, while he didn't campaign when he was on the block whatsoever. In general, he's a bit above mediocre. At 22nd is Krista from Big Brother 2. She was a huge surprise when I rewatched Big Brother 2, especially since she was known as America's sweetheart, where everyone deserved or thought she was deserving to have the game handed to her due to the circumstances in her real life. She was arguably the only person who was on good terms with both sides of the house from the very beginning, and she definitely used that to her advantage. When she won HOH, she took out someone who has little ties in Autumn, while keeping both sides at bay. Krista did have this weird thing where she lectured people about voting off their friends, but we did see her try to plant seeds with Will to target Hardy and to weaken Nicole, the former being someone she had a final 3 with from the very beginning, but Will sold her out and it caused her downfall. I think Krista would be more comfortable to embrace this side of her if she were on a later season, and while she has good instincts, she never really thrived as well as I think she could. Overall, she's social, strategic, and is good at competitions I can remember. At 21st is Nathan from Big Brother 4. He is someone that is known for making a really bad move, and while it definitely isn't a good move, especially since the person he vetoed not only wouldn't do it to him, but sold him under the river, and it isolated him from everyone in the house, I also think that it wouldn't be seen as such a bad move if this move happened a few seasons later, where everyone was more accustomed to using the vetoes from Big Brother 5 onwards. Despite that, he did show a lot of good qualities for the game. He is good in competitions, good socially, especially in the beginning of the season, where many people in the house wanted to work with him and were strategically capable, which we saw with the Michelle boot, and how he set up his HOH and position in the house, not only with his alliance, but with people outside of the alliance. During his last few days in the house, he turned things around really well, and they were convinced to keep him at the end, but things outside of his control, like the HOH comp, sent him home. If he was on during the last 2 to 3 weeks of his stay like he was during his last few days, I think he would have lasted longer, and it shows to me that he has untapped potential to be a good player or a better player if he was on another season. At 20th is Erica from Big Brother 4 and Big Brother 7. I was expecting Erica to be placed a lot lower, and I did have her a few spots down, but I moved her up into the top 20 after a few evaluations. On her first season, she mainly just stuck to her alliance, was as honest as she could, where in a house that appreciated honesty in that dynamic, it served her well, and while she did have some off reads at times, she did improve as a player and became one of the stronger ones by the season's end, especially with aligning with Robert at the end and planning on taking Allison to the final two. She changed her strategy successfully in her second season, where many people are not able to and weren't able to switch their strategies in the season, and people in general don't do that in Big Brother overall, and was a lot more cutthroat in the season, but she was also easily manipulated and was emotional. I think on most seasons, she generally makes it far due to being unthreatening, underestimated, and because she is a reliable ally, but she is mainly solid in all categories. She is solid, but not really great in competitions. She has a solid enough social game that causes her to make allies and to not stand out negatively in a social way, but people also get easily annoyed with her, and she's baseline or a bit above baseline strategically, but it makes a combination for a competent player. Like she has all the ingredients, but it doesn't add up into being an upper tier player. At 19th is Will from Big Brother 5. Kind of weird that he's this high on the list when he's the first juror and didn't seem to do a whole lot when he was in the game. He was able to be on decent enough terms with the guys where they can have some conversations with him and did the work so they wouldn't target him while getting extremely close with the woman on the season, to the point where he was a part of the Pinky Swear Alliance. Will was one of the few people who tried to have good relationships with everyone in the house, came up with the Operation Double Date plan, but was outplayed by Jace, had more allies once Lori was booted, and became one of the leading figures of the Pinky Swear Alliance. The issue is, the twins turned on him once Joey started, partially because he couldn't hide his resentment of the twin twist well enough, and while he fought to stay in the house, he was booted in a close vote. It seemed like he was finally gaining some serious momentum, but was nipped when it was starting to happen, and he was also able to make good friends with Marvin too. Socially, I think Will is definitely one of the better players overall, and has a pretty good concept strategically, though I don't remember him doing well in competitions. He's the type that would do well on most seasons, and has some promise. At 18th is Mike from Big Brother 2 and Big Brother 7. It's very clear that he played a bad game on Big Brother 2. No way around it. He became the first HOH because people liked him socially, and he made a good first impression, but that wore off by the end of his reign, where a lot of the house disliked him and voted the opposite of how he wanted to, as a sign to him that they aren't here for his strategy or personality. Getting into a showmatch with Krista gave him and his alliance an additional week, but his time was limited after that, and he had no self-preservation, where he rejected Hardy's deal. And when he was on the block, he whined about saving Kent in the first week, feeling like the latter should be obligated to keep him around, and didn't even bother campaigning to stay in the house. Luckily for him, he was able to watch the game evolve before he returned in Big Brother 7 and came in with a different mindset, where he is willing to lie, backstab, use his social skills, and laid under the radar when he needed to. Mike supported a lot of Will's moves, made his connections, won some competitions here and there, and played a very high-profile game, which the cast appreciated. While he did improve a lot, he did benefit by being the smallest target in the house and having Will guide him, but it's not because he wasn't playing a winning game for himself. At 17th is Marvin from Big Brother 5. Throughout the season, Marvin never really had a solid ally, so while it is impressive that he was able to navigate like he did without one, his biggest fault was that he was not able to make a solid ally, making him expendable to everyone. He was able to position himself where each side needed him for a vote at some point, like where he was initially close with the horsemen and sided with them to take out some of the women, but when things flipped on them, Marvin flipped with that flip, and he was a heavy orchestrator for what would become the Six-Finger Plan. He ended up becoming a floater, though it really wasn't by choice. At the same time, I can't put him higher because he had some confrontational moments, and at times, and does rub people the wrong way with his actions, which was one of the main reasons why he didn't have a solid alliance to begin with. He did make people like him at times due to being funny and being a realist, while everyone knew how smart he was, so while they were threatened by him, they valued him as well. I do think his decision-making, especially at the end with targeting Adria, who had no one, and getting in between Drew and Diane, was not very smart, but overall he showed how solid of a player he is. At 16th is Rachel from Big Brother 6. I didn't expect Rachel to make it this high on the list, even within the tier she is in, but I think that others made more large mistakes or have bigger holes in their games, as well as the skills they displayed. Rachel was able to become the first HOH, nominates the people who didn't speak to her, and targets the person no one really cared about, while having good relationships with everyone else in the house. She maintained this for a few weeks, though some like Maggie and Eric saw her as a threat, but it went away once she joined the Soft Six. Rachel benefited from being the sane, rational, and simplistic person in her alliance, where she wasn't overgaming like Kaiser and James, isn't oblivious like Harley and Sarah, and not pissing people off like Janelle. Most of her strategic reads were correct, and taking the more simplistic approach worked for herself and would have worked for her alliance had they just listened. I think Rachel's big issue is that she was not self-interested enough, where she kind of gave up when she was on the block, and we never saw her live up to her fullest potential, but she was solid from what we did see on the show. At 15th is G from Big Brother 4. This rewatch really shocked me about G's skill set as a player, since I mainly remembered him for his two HOHs, and they are pretty bad HOHs, where they both took place in the manner they did due to G's overconfidence and arrogance, while not seeing the forest in the trees. In general, I think he is a better player than he is given credit for, and he is a better player for sure when he is not in direct power, as he was able to have a secret alliance with June, where they worked both sides to their advantage, and while he was in the dream team with Justin and Robert, he wasn't seen as the main target or threat like Justin, but wasn't seen as lowly and had a better social game and respect than Robert, so he wasn't in a poor position and was in a good middle ground. He knew how to undermine Justin subtly and was the only one out of his group to play with self-interest, as he threw the Final 7 HOH and convinced Justin to make the wrong move on his behalf on his HOH, while also building good social and strategic bonds with people outside of his alliance. At 14th is Lisa from Big Brother 3. Her reputation over the years is a very interesting one to me, where people initially thought she was a very poor player, and many people kind of overestimated her skills to claim she is some borderline mastermind, but I'm right in the middle. Lisa is naturally a very social, friendly person, which is always a good trait to have in Big Brother, and was shockingly self-aware. She knew that her heart is very big, so she played with it and let it guide her instincts, which we saw where she didn't trust Josh despite him being an ally for her. I think she set up her first HOH really well, where she got in a majority alliance and nominated people that the house didn't care for. She continued building relationships throughout the next few weeks, but got a wake-up call when she was on the block and her own allies were plotting to send her home. Luckily for her, she built better relationships with the outsiders than Eric did and was able to flip to the other side while not pissing off her original allies. Danielle started taking Lisa under her wing, and she taught Lisa way too much by the end. I think Lisa is a player who learns more and more as they go, can pivot well, and is one that can adapt. And while she isn't great strategically, she's solid in that element and in competitions while being great socially. Just a very likable player who is easily underestimated. At 13th is April from Big Brother 6. Another person who is relatively underrated, but I think April has all the skills to be a borderline good player, and definitely the skills to be an upper middle tier player. She was one of the few in her alliance who consistently spoke with the Sovereign Six, and while they didn't necessarily trust her, they felt more comfortable with her over many of her allies, and it was why she was not targeted by the side of the house for a majority of the season. She and Jennifer were definitely more self-interested than the others in her alliance and laid low for the first several weeks of the season, while also having good relationships in her alliance. Of course, when the Yvette pitch went wrong and Jennifer decided to send home Kaiser, her position was definitely weakened and it brought a lot of unwarranted attention to her, but it seemed like she was able to mend things pretty quickly. When she won HOH, we saw her strengthening her relationships not only with her alliance, but the South, as she was seen as the safer who kept the South safe while also being the one who sent James home once and for all, while undermining Yvette. She was the final one nominated in the season due to the good social work she did, and was the only one who spoke to Janelle about the game in the Final Four. I think she's pretty adaptable and played a good game, or a good enough game, where she can win in the dynamics of the season, and I think she would do better on a different season. The final person in this tier at 12th is James from Big Brother 6 and Big Brother 7. He was someone who was never considered a bad or a mediocre player, but was always too sloppy for me to consider him a good or a great player, especially based on his Big Brother 6 game. Now that I went through his 2 seasons, all he wanted was a loyal alliance. He was loyal to Eric and wanted to work with him until Eric threw him under the bus. He was excited about the Sovereign 6 until Howie nominated himself and Sarah, where he planned to be loyal to them. He was excited about working with Season 6 again in Big Brother 7, and he was loyal to them, but they screwed him over with their decisions. And he wanted to go to the end with the Legion of Doom, but Chotan cut him at the end. Despite all that, James has the tendency to play both sides, where him needlessly swearing in the Bible to Yvette about Harry and Rachel was what got him in the poor position to begin with, and he put both sides against one another well for the rest of the season. He was able to properly manage all sides when he was in Big Brother 7, and he had Season 6 and the Legion of Doom in his back pocket, and early in the game, he had good relationships with people like Jace and Diane. Rich's alliance was jealous about his position, and took him out because James had alliances with most of the house. James was always really good socially, and improved that on All-Stars, remained good in competitions while knowing when not to win in Big Brother 7, while improving strategically. I honestly think he could do well on more recent seasons, due to all the above, but he's just missing that slight ingredient that would cause him to be in the quote-unquote good tier. The first person in this tier at 11th is Diane from Big Brother 5 and Big Brother 7. So she just missed out on the top 10, especially with her poor performance on All-Stars and some of her messiness on Big Brother 5, but I was expecting her to be lower before this rewatch. Diane took onto the game extremely quickly, as she was the main person who gathered the troops as to what would eventually become the Pinky Swear Alliance, while bonding with people not in her alliance on her side, like Drew and even the first boot in Mike. She did get into fights with Scott, Jace, and Holly early on that built a target on her, and she was kind of loose-lipped about the sides of the house. But she was able to get Drew to turn on his alliance and to target Holly, which took power away from the Four Horsemen alliance and gave her alliance more power, where she would win the HOH that broke up that alliance, where she targeted Jace and Scott. Once that was dealt with, and Natalie entered the house as a player, Diane was in the prime position, where she and Drew were in the middle of the house, controlled who went home. But Diane got too blinded by Drew, and it ended up costing her the game, while having poor drawing management. And we saw it in Big Brother 7, where she was severely handicapped due to all the preseason mess, having Gardner yell at her, in addition to some personal issues in her life. Despite the Salves winning all of the comps when she was in the house, and Janelle's obsession with her, Diane was able to build good bonds with people, and she still showed some strategic potential. Despite her early boot, I still think she's one of the good players of the era, and showed a lot of skills suited well for Big Brother. At 10th is Maggie from Big Brother 6. Many people probably thought it would be a given that she makes it into the top 10 of this list. It was most definitely was not that way for me, and it's why she barely made it into the top 10. I do think Maggie had pretty good reads for the most part, and was always thinking ahead, especially compared to the cast, who led with their emotions most of the time, or had no ability to read people well. She was put in the position where she was close to going home in the third week, and it was the opposite alliance who kept her, where she was fine with going home over Eric, and I always mentioned that she should have used this to her advantage to kind of play the middle between both sides, or just to not have the Softs target her like they did. Once she made it through, she strengthened the friendship and convinced them to play for the group and not for themselves, which really only benefited her. Of course, there was the move where she was able to convince Howie to nominate his own allies. After that, she somewhat remained under the radar, though she was always a target, but never got personal or nasty with the others, and she deserves props for managing her alliance with all those big personalities who would have most likely targeted one another without her being there. She isn't high because I generally think her social game with her non-allies were extremely poor. She barely won against Yvette, and I do think her type of gameplay only thrives in a select amount of seasons, so it isn't very repeatable. And she doesn't have the social game, like a Derek or whomever else, that would have this be a repeatable strategy. At 9th is Hardy from Big Brother 2. I was not expecting him to make it to the top 10 players of this era, especially since he was really in the first season of this game, where there's no template, and he helped create the template, but he was able to remain high compared to the people who played after him. Hardy was very good socially in the first few weeks, where the guys liked him, the girls felt comfortable with him, where he was seen as honest, respectable, and heroic, and even when Chilton was thinking about targeting him, they didn't have the numbers to do so, and he started winning competitions to take them out. What people tend to forget about Hardy is that he was always thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead of the others, and that skill really benefited him since he knew when to flip on top, when to create alliances, when to ditch alliances, and was able to work with his former enemy well. Of course, he got confrontational several times in the season, was very emotional throughout the season, where they saw him as hypocritical. Even after he was evicted, he was plotting so Will could not nullify his vote. So he pretended to be angry at Nicole, so his vote for her to win would count. I think on most seasons, his game gets him to the very end and is more repeatable than Will's BB2 game, and I think he does better with the power of veto, quicker pacing, and all the other twists, as well as the lack of morality placed on those later seasons, so I think he could adapt very well. Despite that, he is too flawed with how he handles betrayals, and it's meltdowns for me to put him any higher, and he is a bit too reliant on competitions for my liking. At 8th is Roddy from Big Brother 3. People compare him to Hardy, and I do think they have a lot of similarities based on the archetype they fit in, but also on how they play the game. Roddy also uses charm and charisma to win over many of the housemates socially and got himself into a strong alliance early on in the season, where they had a lot of control in the beginning, where he was the main reasons why Lori and Tanya went home, swaying those votes, while winning the HOH that sent Amy home. I will say that he thought ahead once he made the deal with Jerry on his HOH, so when Jerry won the next HOH, he was safe and Jerry targeted Lisa and Eric. Unlike Hardy, we actually do see Roddy play from the bottom, and he plays the bottom very well, or he plays from the bottom very well. He gets the votes to stay before he's nominated alongside Josh, and is able to make it through the Kiara vote by getting close to Marcellus and Amy, while he essentially gaslit Jason to not nominate him in the next round. The issue with Roddy is that he fails to own his gameplay, and kind of lacks self-awareness, and while it works on Big Brother 3, I don't see this working in future seasons, where the game is more hectic, the juries are sequestered, and the morality element is gone in later seasons. And he needs to be honest, where later juries appreciate that more. Great socially, good socially, and okay at competitions, and I was not expecting him to remain this high after I got through all the other seasons. At 7th is Nicole from Big Brother 2. A lot of people tend to forget how quickly Nicole picked up on the game, since while she left a very poor first impression, she immediately realized her mistake and knew that she had to win people over, so she got started on making relationships with many of the house guests, which ended up causing her to stay that first week. After that, she even had a decent relationship with Chilltown, as they were hoping she would be a vote for them to stay, so it kind of put her in the middle for the next few weeks. She ended up aligning with Hardy, and they essentially controlled most of the season. Pissed people off when they flipped on top. She threw the competition so she wouldn't be the one to have to take out Kent, had Will in her back pocket, and really ran the season. The issue is, people did not like her attitude in the season and thought she was a bitch, but she knew that and planned to take her best chance of winning in the final 2 with Hardy. Nicole is good at competitions while being aware of when to throw them, great strategically, and has her social moments, but I do think, like Hardy, she would do better on later seasons, where it is quicker pace and people are more used to cutthroat gameplay, and she was one of the people who created the blueprint and the template for how to play Big Brother. At 6th is Karen from Big Brother 5. She's someone whose reputation has improved a lot over the last few years as a player, and I think a lot of it is warranted, but I don't think she should be in the top tier, as some would probably place her if they made their own lists. Karen is someone who mastered the under-the-radar gameplay, as she made sure to be on decent to good terms with everyone in the house, even the 4 horsemen, who she hated, and we would see her drop little tidbits to people, which would eventually grow. She managed to get herself into an alliance that she rode the entire season, and knew that the twins would become a problem sooner than the others realized it. Karen also built good relationships with Drew and took advantage of that, where she threw Diane under the bus about the Marvin thing, which caused her to be nominated, and she was one of the few people who were nice to the twins when they were getting evicted. She was the only one in the house who understood jury management, and it was cool seeing her break down her strategy with how she had to blend in with every single person in the house to be a chameleon. She's definitely not good at competitions, and can be passive at times, but she is socially and strategically. The final person in this tier at 5th is Drew from Big Brother 5. I really did not want to put Drew this high, but I had no choice after reevaluating everyone from the era and looking at the straight up facts. He got into the Four Horsemen Alliance and was the only one who actually had a good social game since he was able to get along with the Pinky Swear Alliance and they never targeted him, despite knowing that he was aligned with the other guys. He ended up playing the middle when he won the HOH and took out Holly, though I don't think this was his intention at first, and was able to move on from the Alliance once they went down after Scott's eviction. A lot of it was due to his relationship with Diane, but his personality was just different than the other guys, but this ended up putting him right in the middle from the jury portion onwards, especially since he and Diane had the alliance with the twins. He made a really good move in taking Will out at the start of jury since it gave him a lot more agency and ended up working those relationships, and then Diane went out of her way to turn on her alliance to get to the end with him, and he ended up cutting her at the end to get the win. Drew is great at competitions, pretty great socially, and is solid to gut strategically, where he is able to make the cutthroat moves needed, and I'm positive he does well on damn near every season. At the same time, I don't think he is as intentional with many of his moves, and I think a lot of his good social game was partially due to his good looks, which is why he isn't in the top tier. So the first person in this tier at 4th is Jason from Big Brother 3. I initially had him as 2nd and above the 2 other people, but then I thought about it really hard. I compared him and Drew a lot in my BB5 Game Player Tier ranking, and with that in mind, it makes sense for me to put him right after Drew on this list. Jason was not in the majority alliance in the beginning of the season, but he did get approached by Josh and had connections to Roddy, Kiara, and Eric in the beginning, so they relied on him for votes, and he was a subsidiary. While that was happening, he formed a final 2 with Danielle, where they planned on playing both sides, since he was closer to the Roddy side, and she was closer with the Marcellus side. So he essentially laid low for the first 4 or so weeks, and Roddy and Kiara approached him to vote out Lisa, and he didn't, which caused them to be mad at him, but they essentially became powerless from that point onwards. Jason got close to the Marcellus, Amy, and Lisa side of the house, and was able to target the one person who he felt like was targeting him in Jerry, while not doing what Danielle wanted on his HOH. But like Drew, I don't think he held back from nominating Roddy due to being able to play in the middle, but because he was gaslit and outplayed. Jason was then able to make up for this with being the tiebreaker vote for sending Marcellus home, so he showed that he's able to make the hard choices. Jason is great socially, good strategically, with being able to learn as he goes, and is good competitively, so he has the skills to do well in any season, but I don't know if he would have done as well without Danielle, and isn't as intentional, but didn't have to rely on his looks like Drew did. The bronze prize of 3rd goes to June from Big Brother 4. While I knew she was a good player before this rewatch, I really grew a lot of respect for her game during this rewatch. June came in knowing that she would have to be quieter and knew that she had to be extremely observant and flexible. She got herself in the Alliance of 8 and was closer to the Dana, Nathan, and Allison section of the Alliance, where it seemed like they had more control, and was the first one to really utilize her ex as she got into an alliance with G, and they helped one another throughout the season. She did flip with Dana on the latter's HOH, and she was better positioned within the Stooges than Dana was, which was one of the reasons why she stayed the week after when she was nominated against Dana. She started playing hard in the next week, where she and G stopped Nathan and Justin from uniting so they could take cuts to both of them, and June ended up getting close in relationships with Jack and Erica, so she was always on good terms with everyone, and also made her final 2 with Allison. The two of them really pit both sides against one another, while she wasn't the one that was pissing everyone off like Allison was. June knew that she was at the bottom of all of her alliances, and they would not last long, so she had to pivot, and was a lot more respected than Allison. I think June knows how to adapt, and she can play the game without getting as nasty, though she had to win against Allison only, but she was aware of that. I think she could do the same strategy, and be extremely underestimated, especially since she can keep track of her lies. Great strategically, good socially, and solid competitively, while being aware of her strengths and weaknesses. The silver prize of 2nd goes to Danielle from Big Brother 3 and Big Brother 7. Yes, I was thinking about putting her as 4th place, but looking over everything about her 2 games, I just couldn't do it. She adapted to the game extremely quickly in Big Brother 3, and what I like about her on both seasons is that she's aware that when you aren't approached in the first few days, or the first week, it means you're at the bottom of the house, and you have to do something quickly to change that. She did this by making a final 2 with Jason and getting close to the Marcellus, Jerry, Amy's side of the house, where the two of them played both sides, I was able to get close with the women in Kiara and Lisa, who are on the other side as well. Danielle waited until week 4 to make her power move of overthrowing Ruddy by booting Eric, since she was aware that she wouldn't have the numbers to do so if she waited 2 weeks or so to take the shot. After this, she controlled the next several votes and had the house at the palm of her hands. Unfortunately for her, she took people to the end that she was guaranteed to lose against and didn't manage the jury well with her diary rooms. On Big Brother 7, she came in to improve her game and to learn from her mistakes with how to manage people, and I think she was successful with that, despite the sloppy start. She got close with everyone in the house and kissed the butts of Season 6 when they were in power, but was determined to win the HOH that would flip the game. She was able to pull James from his alliance and to make him her Jason, while working with Will and Mike to control the mid-game, and had Erica as a close ally, while being good with Chicken George as well, but ultimately got played once James was snapped. And while she targeted Chilton after this, she was ultimately beaten by them. She even had good relationships with a lot of the early boots in the season as well. Danielle is great socially, great strategically, and is kind of solid at competitions, but she improved on her flaws, changed her strategy, and actually proved how adaptable she was and is on both seasons. And the gold prize of first goes to Will from Big Brother 2 and Big Brother 7. I'm sure this was not surprising whatsoever, even despite me not being the highest on this game in Big Brother 2. He came on his first season being arrogant as hell, really rubbing people the wrong way socially, where he was the target from that side of the house, and that didn't really change for the first 3 or so weeks. Shannon volunteered herself to be voted out, which was the only reason why he was able to make it through that week, but as soon as that happened, he improved exponentially. Will worked on his relationships with Nicole and Hardy, which put him in a better position with the house, campaigned for Mike, got closer to Krista, though his plan to turn Nicole against Hardy ended up backfiring, since it cost for the two of them to target Krista. He continued planting seeds around the entire house, and his biggest strategy was creating narratives in the diary room, where he called the others out for being hypocritical about dishonesty, where he was more honest in comparison. This ended up giving him the win, but I was worried that this wasn't repeatable. While Will did keep some of his prior strategy, like throwing competitions, he became really more aggressive with his gameplay this season, where he was the mastermind, planting seeds to the Sovereign Six and the others about one another, making deals to be safe, while also using his businesses and bribery to keep himself and Mike safe. He was able to weaponize and manipulate Janelle while getting into an alliance with James and Danielle, where they continued pitting Janelle and Danielle against one another by giving each of them veto wins when the other was HOH. He adapted to the faster pace and the power of veto while being stronger socially and strategically in the season, while also being open to winning competitions if needed, where he was willing to win the final 6 and final 5 vetoes. So this ends my coverage on the first era of Big Brother, and it was interesting watching all 6 of these seasons and seeing how the show from the television perspective, how the game and the house guests and the twists all evolved, and we won't see as much of a evolution in the other eras like we do in this era. Honestly, there are a lot of good players in this era, and a lot of memorable players in their era too, and at this point that I'm recording, I'm in the middle of Big Brother 8, and you can definitely tell the differences in how the show was portrayed and even how the people play the game. So my BB8 review retrospective should be up in a few days, and I'm looking forward to making more BB videos, and hopefully BB25 will be a good season. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with something else soon. Bye!